Please go ahead.
Namo Namaha. Om Shuklam Baradharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vigno Pashantaye. Namasarvebhyaha and welcome to today's monthly Vyākhyāna and wish you all a very auspicious, very happy Vijaya Dashami. So at Samskara Foundation, we have few programs ongoing, of course, in addition to the Gurukula that is happening in India and the online classes which keep on happening for all age group children and adults. In addition to those, there are a few additional programs that we have been undertaking. One of those is Saraswati Sadan Library, Granthalaya in Atlanta. So it's a library and much more than a library of Indian Hindu civilizational books, content, which can be easily accessible to the public, the community here. But much more than a library, it's also a center of learning, uh, exploring the roots of our culture. We conduct events, we invite speakers, we conduct in-person classes here at the Cultural Center in collaboration with Shri Mata Darbar. And in in that context, we conduct one monthly um, Vyākhyāna series, one talk or a lecture or a conversation with scholars at least once a month. And today we are in that same series going to learn more about Indian knowledge system, relevance of the Indian education system from noted scholar Srimati Sahana Singh ji. Srimati Sahana Singh ji does not need to stand in need of any introduction from us. She is a very renowned scholar, speaker, researcher, columnist, very popular person, and she is a subject matter expert in this history and tradition of our Indian knowledge system, education system. She has published two very well received books, both of which throw so much light upon what the Indian education system, Gurukula system, and way of learning has been in past, how it was distorted, how it was sabotaged, how it underwent a lot of challenges. And then she has very vocal and very thoughtful perspective about what can be done to revive that knowledge system as well. So, without much ado, what we are going to do, we will light a lamp at the Saraswati Sadan, Shri Mata Darbar Granthalaya here, and I request that to happen. Now, may I request Acharya Ashutosh ji and his students from Gurukula to kindly have a auspicious beginning by Vedochara, please.
Sri Ganesaya Namaha, Sri Saraswati Namaha, Purusaya Namaha Garanatha Saraswati Ravi Shukra Brihaspati Panchayata Samsmaran Nityam Vedavani Pravartane Harihi Om Salasasnuti Madhutam Kriya Darasya Sanim Medam Musala Jam
ये सहाना आंटी का एक सचिन है वे
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आचार्य जी। कुछ कहना चाहेंगे विजयदशमी पर्व के उपलक्ष्य पर?
बहुत बहुत बधाई सभी को विजयदशमी के उपलक्ष्य पर।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आचार्य जी, बहुत सौभाग्य की बात है। तो सो विद दैट auspicious beginning, without much further ado, may I request Srimati Sahana ji to kindly enlighten us.
Namaskar to everyone in the Samskara family, as well as all the people who have joined in online, people who are present there at the Saraswati Sadan. It's a great honor for me to be the first speaker in this new series started by Samskara Foundation. And I'm also feeling very privileged and also humbled by the presence of the Acharya of the Gurukula in Uttar Pradesh joining us and their students. And because they are keeping alive the practice, the tradition, whereas we are only indulging in intellectualism. So my pranams to them. So I will share my screen and let's see. And please let me know if it's visible. I hope this is visible.
We can see Sahana ji, yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be speaking today about learning from Bharat's rich pedagogical traditions. And most of you would know the meaning of pedagogy, but just to clarify, pedagogy is the science of teaching. So the whole, the science and art of teaching, whereby you take care of the theory of knowledge, you take care of the psychology, educational psychology, and the emotional and mental development of the learners. So the whole science of teaching, which came from India, is very, very interesting to know. We do know that India was very well known for the knowledge it gave to the world, but today we'll go a little bit into the pedagogical traditions. So to get some basic facts out of the way, so we have in India a very ancient tradition of formal disciplined learning. And this attracted students from around the world. So India was very, very well known for its universities, for its gurukulas, for its ashrams. And the gurus also were very well known. And we have evidence of this from all the writings of the travelers or the students who came to study in Bharat. It was also an extraordinary ecosystem of learning where parents would push their children to get into the top gurukulas, top mathas, top universities. So this was a very interesting thing where it didn't matter whether you're rich or poor, but everybody knew that education is extremely important, learning is extremely important. And there were many forest universities. This is a term that some people may not agree with because we are calling them universities, especially in the modern world, in the Western world, they would say, why are you calling them universities? Because universities means that you should have, a common curriculum, common system of pedagogy. There is certificate, awards, degree given, and things like that. And of course, there should be a building and things like that. But if you go back and see the history of education, then you will see that in India, long before you had brick and mortar buildings, learning was conducted right in the open air, under the trees, in the ashramas. And there would be departments of study, different departments of study, and there would be a presiding guru who is taking care of all the other gurus to see whether they are following the curriculum in the right way. So I definitely like to call them forest universities. And they were teaching so many advanced disciplines like science, math, astronomy, prosody, literature, etymology, and what have you. Now, we also had many what you call the rites of passage, or the ceremonies which were linked with educational milestones, right? And that shows to you that education was so important that they are actually in the ceremony, in the list of samskaras that are performed, right? There are 16 samskaras that Hindus have to go through during the course of their life, which includes, marriage and things like that, vivaha. So education-linked milestones are many in the samskaras, and one of them is this Vidyarambha, where the first time a child learns how to trace the alphabets. And this was celebrated through a ceremony, and it had different names. Like in Bengal, I see that it's called Hate Khodi, where during Saraswati Puja, children learn to trace letters on a slate or something like that. And this also shows to you that it is celebrated, that when the child first comes to learn alphabets, it's something to be celebrated. How important is education can be gleaned by that. Then we had a ceremony called Upanayana, where a child goes into higher learning. And again, these are very elaborate and beautiful ceremonies, highly misinterpreted today by people who are studying it in universities. But if you go and learn from the insiders of the tradition and see what it really means, it is very, very beautiful. In fact, that would need a whole lecture in itself. So the sacred thread ceremony, which was for initiation into Vedic learning, okay? This also shows to you how institutionalized education was in India. Then, in fact, there was also a ceremony for graduation called Samavartana. That also was similar to the Upanayana. When a student completed education, there would be a Samavartana. Now, this is a map in my book, in my second book, Revisiting the Educational Heritage of India, where I have tried to plot the well-known centers of advanced learning in India. And I found that they covered almost the whole of India, except maybe the western part because of the desert conditions there possibly. But I'm sure there are many, many more gurukulas and ashramas over there that I need to put down in this map. And these existed in different timelines. They were not existing at the same time. But, this gives you an idea of how much education was valued and all over the country, all over the land of Bharatvarsha, which is greater India. It was not just one country, right? There were many kingdoms. And spread out over them were all these gurukulas and ashramas and mathas. And the students would travel long distances to study in these places. They came from Western Asia, they came from Eastern Asia, from China, Lanka, and all those places. And you will see that there were also specializations. There were actually some of the centers of learning which specialized in Nyaya, for example, logic, another center which specialized in Vedanta of a certain kind, then some which specialized in Bauddha Dharma, so they would be the viharas, and so on. So in northern India, we had Takshashila, which is one of the oldest excavated universities in India, and today it lies in Pakistan. And it had so many disciplines that were taught, and many of our famous acharyas that we know today, right, like Chanakya, Charaka, were said to have studied over there. Then we had Sharda Peeth in northern India, in Kashmir, where Kashmir itself was known as Sharda Desh. Again, it was a temple university. It had a library attached to it where rare and precious manuscripts were kept. And students and gurus would travel all the way to get access to those manuscripts because they were the most authentic. Eastern India, everybody knows Nalanda, Vikramshila. If you ask them about ancient Indian universities, they'll just say Nalanda. And that's why this map is important. It shows you that we had way, way too many universities beyond Nalanda and Takshashila and Vikramshila. And so in southern India, you see most of these are temple universities, Kanchipuram, right? Ennairam. And there you will find a rich collection of inscriptions in the south, which are talking about how much scholarships has been awarded to the students and for which subjects. All these the things you will find more intact in southern part of India, maybe because there was lesser contact time with the invaders. The teacher. So we should know a little bit about what the teacher stood for. The teacher occupied a very, very high position in society in India, and in fact, right to the times when the British came, in the pre-colonial times and early part of the British rule also, you could see the reverence for the teacher, the acharya, the guru. So the scholars were freed from the burden of earning a livelihood because the entire society took it upon itself to support the gurukulas and the ashramas. So they would offer whatever help they could give. It didn't matter if a person was poor or rich. This has been documented that even the poorer sections of society were donating to the gurukulas to ensure that the students are well fed and the acharyas are well taken care of, so that they can completely focus on learning. And the donations to teachers and pathshalas and educational institutions was highly esteemed. It carried great punya, merit within the society. Then the guru was also a very special person. He or she was a person who embodied knowledge. So knowledge, if you could make a knowledge into a person, then that is the guru. And so the guru is a walking, talking book. You can just, the more time you spend with the guru and observe and engage in conversations, the more you learn from the guru. And so experiential learning was highly emphasized in those days when you had to stay with the guru, help out with all the tasks in the Gurukula, and thus learn. And the relationship between the guru and shishya was very important, and it's beautiful. You can see that in many accounts. And you can see that the guru is a parent, both the mother and father. In fact, the guru is everything for the student. The guru is extremely strict when needed, but is also extremely indulgent. And his heart is very, very soft and cares for each and every student. So that was the relationship. Now, we must also understand the distinction between lower and higher education. So not everybody studied the Vedas, right? So there were, in fact, most of the people, 95% of the people were engaged in learning skills, worldly education, which will help to earn money, revenue, in business and so on. So that was skill-based education. Most people went into skill-based education, but a basic understanding of the Veda would be there in whatever they were studying, because the teachers the acharyas and the gurus of those, in those departments would also have some knowledge of the Veda. But then the higher education was one where you concentrated on Veda and Vedanta. And you must also understand that higher and lower doesn't really mean in a demeaning way. Lower is not really demeaning. It's just that higher refers to higher consciousness, the higher states of consciousness. So it was about the knowledge which would take students towards self-awareness and understanding of the self, right? So it would be deep immersion into Vedas, and very few people were engaged in it. And so the whole impression created today of, a lot of people wanted to learn the Vedas and they are being prevented to learn the Vedas. It was not like that. In fact, it was made easier for everybody that not everybody has to go into Vedic education. They are free to study in pathshalas. They are free to go and learn skills which will make them rich, because the rules for those who studied the Veda or went into higher education was that they cannot amass wealth for themselves and they have to lead very austere lifestyles, very, very regimented lifestyle in the sense of discipline, regimented in the sense of getting a discipline so that they are doing actually a sadhana not just learning, right? So it was also about this concept of sa vidya ya vimuktaye. So knowledge is that which liberates. And this is something that was really followed by the people who went into higher education. I would like to point out that there were 4 main attributes of ancient Indian education. I mean, there are many, but these 4 stood out for me. First, that it was nature-centric. Second, it was interdisciplinary. Third, it was holistic. And fourth, it was purposeful, not arbitrary, not just random learning. It was very purposeful. So let's go into the first attribute, nature-centric. So we know that classes were mostly held in the midst of nature, right? Under a tree, in different seasons, students are there right in the midst of the flora and fauna and learning. So nature was itself an important teacher, right? Because by being in the midst of nature, higher truths would be reached by observations. So the guru would give tasks to the students, or the guru's wife, Guru Ma, would give tasks to the students, like going to graze the cows, bring water from a well. And in the process of doing all that, they would see a lot of things like observe the changing seasons. They would watch the germination of seeds. They would learn how to make some herbal concoction, some kada and things like that. So nature was being used as a teacher. And the one pedagogical aspect that I want to point out that was that there was no spoon feeding, right? It was not like the student will keep interrogating the guru and direct answers will be given. It was not like that, because it was understood that, if you give straight answers to students, then that's it. They'll actually not even retain it. And this happens to us even today when we Google something and we get the answer and we find it, and a few days later, we don't even remember what the answer was, right? Because we spent so little time with it. Whereas in ancient India, it was about the students seeking the answer themselves. And in that way, they would retain it because they've made all that effort to find the answer. The guru would give them pointers, right? Guru would guide them towards finding the answers. Now, elements of nature were studied in great detail in those times, right? Everything about nature, how a seed sprouts, how the leaves change color and things like that. And sustainability was built into every discipline. This is very important. There was no need to, to have a subject like environmental engineering, sciences, or sustainability. There was no need for concepts like carbon offset and things like that, because the whole system was such that nature was sacred. And once, you are already worshipping your devatas, your grama devatas, your kula devatas, then nature is already sacred to you. So you don't need to be taught that rivers have to be protected and trees have to be protected. So that was the culture. And then events observed in nature were correlated with human life. So everything that you saw around you could also become an analogy for something that's happening in your life. Now, here is an example from Chandogya Upanishad, which shows to you how nature is being used to understand the greater truths of life. So we have this student called Shvetaketu, who is asking, who has been told by his father, who is also his guru, Uddalaka, to go and examine the seeds of a tree, the Nyagarodha tree, the banyan tree. And he has looked inside the seed and he has not found anything. So he's telling his father, I do not see anything. Then the father is saying, he's making him go deeper into it. He's saying, but from this very seed, the tree comes out. The big, huge tree that you're seeing around you, so many trees, they come from seeds like this. So in the invisibility that you're seeing right now, there exists the tree itself. But that tree emerges from the seed and manifests only when it is pushed by the subtle energy that you cannot see. And it is the same subtle energy that is in all the living beings. So just imagine this beautiful understanding that is imparted to a student in the midst of nature. This is just one small example from one Upanishad. The second attribute was that there was an interdisciplinary approach to knowledge. And here there is a quote from Charaka Samhita, which I'll not read in Sanskrit, but in English, it is that a physician who has learned one science only cannot be sure of his own science, which is Ayurveda in this case. And for this reason, this physician has to be versed in many sciences. This is mind-boggling when you think about this since thousands of years ago, this understanding that if you just study your own subject, your own science, you will actually not even understand it properly unless you go a little bit into other sciences. If you're well versed in other sciences, then you will take something from those sciences, some insights from there, and you will understand your own science better. The third one is that education was holistic. It was whole. You see everything as a whole, not just in parts. So there were no artificial barriers between math, art, and religion that you see today, how we are compartmentalized. Even though there is a lot of improvement in interdisciplinary learning today, especially in America, where they push towards it. But in India, it was just very natural. Okay, so you could worship the sun as a divine being, which is in the realm of religion today. But that did not stop from calculating the distance between the earth and the sun. And at the same time, there would be beautiful poetry that was composed to invoke the power of Surya Devata. And all this would be done within the education system. So that is the beauty of the holistic learning that existed in those times. The sacred and the rational were blended. So geometry was used to build accurate altars for yagyas, right? So the Havan, during Havan Homa, where you had to build accurate Vedi and yantras. So you would need geometry. And so here is math being used right there for religion. And then you had to use astronomy, the principles of astronomy and trigonometry to calculate the auspicious timings for rituals. So again, mathematics being invoked for doing ceremonies which are in the realm of religion today. This is in contrast to Europe, where they had to strictly separate religion and science because they were both interfering with each other. Religion was stopping science from doing certain things, certain experiments. But in India, we didn't have that kind of a big conflict. I mean, there were minor things maybe at times. For example, maybe in this section of the human body, it was considered a little bit unclean, but then it wasn't like a huge fight or rioting or anything. Those who wanted to study that were doing it, right? Unlike the Western world, where it was only during the age of enlightenment that the Western world achieved freedom from religious dominance. Now, the fourth attribute which stood out for me was the purposefulness, like how a good example is how we studied language, right? How the alphabet, the letters of the alphabet in Sanskrit were, one of the arrangements was to arrange according to the points from which it is articulated in the mouth, in the whole system, right? In the oral system. So, it was not like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which has no purpose. Why the way it is learned in schools, in kindergartens, they just learn it and they chant it. But there's no reasoning behind why B has to come after A or C has to come after B. But in Indian languages, you see the science even in approaching humanities, right? So ka, kha, ga, ga, nga is pronounced from the kantha, okay, from the throat. Ka, kha, when you say it, you can feel where it is coming from. Ka, kha, it is coming from the throat. Then cha, cha, ja, ja, nga is coming from the talavya, which is a little bit higher up. Then ta, tha, da, dha, na are the murdhanya syllables, right, which are coming up from the palate, where you are using the palate. And dantya, ta, tha, da, dha, na, all of which require the teeth. You use the teeth to pronounce them. Pa, pa, ba, bha, ma, where you use the lips to pronounce the letters of the alphabet. So very intelligently arranged sequences. All these things you will find it very, very commonly common in when you learn Sanskrit or language, right? In the Indian languages. Now, here is just a little side story, an anecdote that I thought might be interesting to you. So how, when, the Europeans knew that the Indians are very good in math and astronomy and they do calculations, they're able to accurately predict eclipses. So there were a lot of Europeans who were very curious to know how the Brahmanas were doing calculations, and they were trying their best to learn their methods. And one such interaction happened between French astronomer Le Gentil in the 18th century. He forced a Brahmana to sit in front of him and teach him how he was calculating the timings of the eclipses. And then when he saw how he did it, he was most confused because the Brahmana was not referring to any tables. In the European world, tables had been developed and so many things had come all in writing. Whereas here in this man was chanting some verses from memory. Then he was moving some shells, cowrie shells on some squares, and he was calculating the timing of the eclipses. eclipse. So then a lot of conversation happened between them. And then finally, when Leigh Gentile understood what it was about, he said, this is very fascinating that they are doing this, but this is not the way that we can do it. So he wanted to see whether there was something that Europeans could also adopt the same way, the same pedagogy, you could say, of calculating the eclipse. But he said that this is super fast, but at the same time, there's a lot of memory involved, which we cannot handle. Because this Brahmana was coming to some number, some calculation while doing a whole range of calculation. And that number, he was not writing it somewhere. It was in his mind. Then he would go to the next calculation. Then he'll get a new number. He'll remember that number. Now this, he said, Leigh Gentile said that we will get mixed up if we do this. So I think it's better if they use their method and we use our method. Of course, Leigh Gentile was one of the nicest Europeans who, even though he looked down on the Indians, yet he said there was something to learn from them. Now let's look at 4 interesting pedagogical tools which were used to teach various things in the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. So games, it is very fascinating that there were so many educational games that were played which helped to learn something or the other. One example is the game of snakes and ladders, Saap Sidi, which had various names like Moksha Patamu, Moksha Pat, or Gyan Chopar. And today we play it as snakes and ladders, where it's just a game of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 100 maybe. And you throw the dice, whatever number you get, you go to that number. And on that number, if there's a ladder, you move to a higher number. If there's a snake, you come down to a lower number. But in those times, this game was linked with moral values. So if you landed on a square which has some virtue, maybe dharma, or it has ahimsa, right? So some virtue, some noble quality, then you would ascend on a ladder and go to a higher number. But if you landed on a square with krodha, ahankara, some negative trait, then you would go down a snake to a lower number. And then ultimately you would reach the final square would be Vaikuntha or whatever else, signifying moksha, But in this way, children did not have to be lectured on what are the noble qualities and what are the qualities to be avoided, because just by playing games like these children knew what is good and what is bad. At least theoretically, they knew that this is something to be treasured, this quality is appreciated by the elders, and this one they do not like, right? So this is an amazing way, without preachiness, that games were teaching values. I'll go into more games. Then we also had stories as a pedagogical tool. We had memory training, and we had logic and debate as well. Now, many of you would know that chess itself was a game that came out of India, right? It was called Chaturanga in the earlier version, which became Shatranj, and then it became chess in the modern world. And Chaturanga the name comes because there were 4 divisions, elephantry, chariotry, cavalry, infantry. Infantry are the foot soldiers, cavalry are the horse, soldiers riding the horses, and chariot, those who having an additional cart in the back for someone to sit there and fire the weapons. So that was Chaturanga. So Chaturanga was entirely like a game of war, but it also involved so many intellectual faculties that it was called gymnasium of the mind by many people. And on the picture on the right, you can see a depiction of Krishna and Radha playing Chaturanga on the Ashtapada board. Okay. Now, Benjamin Franklin has actually written a whole essay on the morals of chess, and he compares it to the game of life itself. How when you learn to be a good chess player, you are learning so many things that are good for you in life itself. So many life skills come from playing chess. So problem solving, critical thinking, pattern recognition, concentration, strategizing, not wilting under pressure. When you're under extreme pressure, the opposite side is taking away your pieces, and now you are under pressure. Then how do you play the game? So many things were taught through games like Chaturanga. Another interesting thing is that, we had the concept of 64 arts. Chauset Kala, which was arts that very learned people had to learn all those 64 arts. But again, those arts were also played like games, So one of them is what today has become modern Antakshari, right? So this again, games. See how the games are teaching various skills. So verses would be recited from memory, and the last letter becomes the first letter from which the next verse has to start, right? So if it's a game, then, people seated in a circle, and then the verses have to be chanted in that order. The last letter becomes the first letter. And today, of course, we made it all about movies, songs, and things like that. But in those days, it was about shlokas, stotras, and things like that. So it was far more profound and intellectual than what it is today. Then riddles, puzzles, all these were the kalas, part of the 64 kalas that were taught. And it included deciphering enigmatic speeches. So somebody is saying something in code and you have to understand what that means. Then reciting tongue twisters. These were games that were played. And these are actually playing very important roles. Tongue twisters are helping you to loosen up your tongue and, to say things very clearly, improving your articulation. Then, the art or the game of completing an incomplete poem or stanza. So somebody would start a poem and or has composed a poem and just says 2 lines and says, okay, next player has to complete it. And on the spot, it has to be done. Imagine. Then decoding of code words, of course. Then art of repeating a stanza verbatim immediately after hearing it. Again, this was both an art that was taught and also a game. So you hear something and you have to immediately repeat it. What a wonderful skill this was. And today we have lost it completely. Even if we write down, we can't remember, forget about repeating after somebody. Stories. Now, stories are an age-old way of teaching. And in India, you can see that a whole variety of stories were being used in education. So ours was a civilization that understood the power of storytelling through epics such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, as well as Puranas, songs, dance, drama, puppet shows, paintings. And today, and later years, it became movies, right? Movies are actually doing the same things. So the power of storytelling and using that to teach. And you can imagine how Ramayana and Mahabharata were used. They were actually part of the curriculum. So Ramayana was part of the curriculum, and it was used to not just make it a very interesting story that students are learning, but they're also learning Sanskrit through that. They are learning Sanskrit grammar through that, the nuances of the language through that. They're learning about, conduct, social conduct. They're learning about politics through that. So many things were taught through stories itself at a younger age. And later on, the students could go and study the theory behind all those things, right? Then we had Panchatantra. Everybody is familiar in India, at least, with Panchatantra, short stories and fables, Hitopadesha, Jataka tales. And these are using talking animals to impart practical wisdom. Again, a very clever way, because children will not be so interested in stories where humans, elders are telling something to the youngsters. But if there's a lion telling something, or a tiger or a deer is saying something, then they're very interested to know what is happening here, right? So Panchatantra, for example, these stories are actually teaching Niti Shastra. And the children won't even know that they're learning the principles of Niti Shastra. And only later life, when they go and specialize in Niti Shastra, then they will realize that, okay, this was the theory that was being taught through that story. Okay. Again, more stories, Vikram Vetal, Tenali Rama stories, Akbar Birbal stories. These are all a continuum which are coming down from the storytelling as pedagogy, which of tradition of India. Katha Sarit Sagara, again, a very, very famous collection of stories. And I also added to this the Paramananda Shishyula Katha in Telugu. This is very interesting. Telugu people would know this. These are a bunch of stories that are very, very funny, which are talking about a guru and his 7 students, right? And the 7 students go and they are foolish students, and they have hilarious escapades. They keep making mistakes, and then the guru is scolding them, and then they are, so and through these stories, the people will learn about something that is, what is the right way of doing something and things like that. And it's also for entertainment. For example, there's a story of, students who are in that Paramananda Shishula Katha. Students are rolling down a log, down a hill. And when they go down the hill, they realize that, they're not rolling. They are carrying logs of wood down a hill. And when they go to the bottom, then they realize that they should have actually rolled it down. It would have been so much easier. Less effort would have been needed. And then they foolishly carry the log right to the top of the hill and then roll it down. Okay, so these kind of stories would make students laugh, but they're also learning something through that. And then in Kannada, we have the Gampra Gumpu. Because I am from Karnataka, my parents have told me stories of Gampra Gumpu, right? Again, a set of foolish people who are making mistakes, bungling up all the way as they're traveling. And all these stories are hilarious. In the end, everything is good. All is well. It ends well, but there is something to be learned from it. Now, memory training was an extremely important part of our ancient education system. And today we are doing all these studies to realize that there is a superior learning curve when memory is enhanced. When there was a study called the Sanskrit effect, which was done, I think, in 2016 or 17, where there was an Italian researcher who did a study on Vedic Pandits, and he found that there was a cognitive improvement, the area of the brain which deals with cognition that enlarged during the course of the Veda learning. And this is fascinating. Memory training done in, which was part of education. And it was pointed out by scholars as well, like Yijing, who has written about the extraordinary memory and intellectual capacity of Brahmanas. And then there are other travelers who said, no, it's not just the Brahmanas, even the regular people in India seem to have elephant's memory. For example, the dhobi takes clothes from so many houses and after washing returns all the clothes correctly to the houses without any confusion. So where is this memory coming from? So there was a lot of memory training that used to happen. And that I think that is missing in today's educational system, which is not good because it's affecting other areas of development as well. Now, even in the methods of Vedic chanting, the Vedas were chanted in 11 different ways, which was just designed to aid memorization and perfect transmission down the generations, so that there would be you would correct if you make a mistake in the chanting, you would know because of the ways in which you have memorized. So there is Samhita Patha, Pada Patha, Krama Patha. So imagine if A, B, C, D, F are the different padas, the different words that in the Veda, in the Vedic text. The Samhita Patha would just be about just saying it as it is, A, B, C, D, E, F. But Pada Patha would have a pause after each word, like A, B, C, D, like that. Then the third way of chanting was the Krama Patha, where you would say A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, and so on, right? You see that in music also, Sa, Re, Re, Ga, Re, Ma, Ga, Ma, like that. Jata Patha was, now it became more and more complex. As students advanced in their Vedic education, they would learn all this, A, B, B, A, B, then B, C, C, B, B, C, C, D, D, C, C, D, and so on. So various combinations of the padas, so that as they go through it, they will just perfectly memorize it and they will just not go wrong. And this is why we still have the Vedas in the pristine form, because such a genius method of oral transmission was devised. The most difficult way of chanting is the Ghanapatha. And even today, those who become Ghanapatis are revered in Vedic Veda Pathshalas, because it's so complicated. Look at what they have to learn, the way of chanting. Okay. Now, so that was the memory part of it. Then we have logic. Logic was extremely important. Nyaya, which was, which was taught in ancient India, even in the forest universities, in the Gurukulas, and some people went deep into Nyaya itself. And Nyaya was the science of reasoning, right, which deals with epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge and logic. Now, all the 6 darshanas in Hindu Dharma, all the schools of Indian philosophy, they use Nyaya. So Nyaya was very important. You could, if you made a statement, it had to be evaluated for its reasoning, whether it makes sense or not. And so Rishi Akshapada Gautama, he is said to have brought together the prevailing knowledge of Nyaya under the Nyaya Sutras. And the Nyaya Sutras, they focused on the art of debate, tarka, the means of valid knowledge, pramana, the doctrine of syllogism, avyaya, examination of contemporaneous philosophical doctrines, anya mata pariksha. So these are if you just go into this discipline, you will realize how intelligent it was, how well students are being trained into understanding what is the theory of knowledge before they actually go into knowledge. So they know what is logic. They will understand what is pramana, right? So what is to be taken as good pramana, what is to be taken as bad pramana. So there were various pramanas like pratyaksha, perception, anumana, inference, upamana, comparison, shabda, so not speech, sorry, there's a autocorrect there, arthapatti, assumption, anupalabdhi, non-apprehension, and so on. So the Nyaya school, I think, adopted only the first 4, that is pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, and shabda. Other schools adopted different evidence. As they are in their school, that this is the evidence method that we will use. So all this is hugely interesting. because logic is the first thing that people had to study before they went into higher learning. If there is no logic, then you will be, if one person is saying something, it cannot be refuted by the other because there is no logic involved, right? So logic was extremely important, and I think today we need to take something from it, from Nyaya Shastras. We need to take something from it in our modern educational system. And I'm hoping that Sarvesh Tiwari ji of Samskara, the president, is going to start a course on Nyaya soon. He has already done a course with us and we really enjoyed it a lot, some of us who joined it. Now, this logic, whatever was learned, was used in debate, right? So the Indian civilization fostered a strong spirit of rational inquiry, disagreement, closely observing things like physical phenomena, applying rules of logic to understand the causes, what is cause, what is correlation, all these things were studied. And debate was also used as a way of teaching as well as for examination, for assessment also it was used. So, for example, in Nadia, in the Nadia school, in Nadia University in Bengal, the teachers were recruited on the basis of their ability to debate. So there would be a jury which is looking at how these acharyas are debating, or want to be acharyas are debating, and then they would be selected to teach in that college. And then as an examination also, Nalanda, all these universities had testing of the ability to debate, because by looking at how they are debating on a certain topic, the acharya can understand whether they have understood the topic. Okay. And we find references to Tarka Vidya, the science of art and science and art of logic and debate in ancient texts, in Ramayana, Mahabharata, Skanda Purana, Yagnavalkya, so many texts. And we can see that it's a very, very ancient discipline. Not only that, kings often organized intellectual tournaments. So there would be debate competitions where acharyas would come from around the region, and then those who had superior knowledge, superior debating skills or public speaking skills, they would be awarded. They could even be taken out in a ratha so that people can see that these are your role models. So India has this huge and rich educational legacy. We have thinkers like Kannada, Sushruta, Charaka, Aryabhata, Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, Bhaskaracharya, Panini, Patanjali, Pingala, Bharata, and so many other gurus who have left a profound and enduring influence on the disciplines that we are studying even today. So we must remember, when we are studying all these subjects like math, science, medicine, language, art, music, philosophy, even water management, so many, when you go back to the history of it, you will find that this discipline has already been explored in ancient Bharata. And then it has been refined as it went along, and the texts were written, commentaries were written on these texts, so many debates took place, and we went forward, right? Nowadays, there is a trend towards studying Indian knowledge system, especially in India now. IKS, as it's called, it is being promoted, and it's there as an elective even in engineering colleges and so on. It shows how India's deep intellectual legacy is relevant. But we need more promotion. We need to recover and study what's in the manuscripts. So right now it is just begun, but we are still just at the tip of the iceberg. We have hardly seen anything what is deep inside. Now, there's this diagram is also there in my book, The Transfer of Knowledge from India. I would encourage you to get the book and see this diagram, because it gives you in a nutshell what is all the knowledge that went from India to the rest of the world. Like how Indian knowledge went to Greece and Egypt, how it went to Europe, and what were those disciplines that it went, like for example, medicine, how it went to Greece, Charaka's oath, how it is, how it was taken, it was reworded into the Hippocratic Oath. And it was, in fact, if you look at the Hippocratic Oath, it is just a very dumbed down version of Charaka's Oath. Charaka's Oath is far more profound. So many concepts. The concept of Atma itself has gone from India. The fact that even animals have Atma. And so, when you're killing an animal, you're actually not killing something that has no feelings. So this was, in fact, Pythagoras took this knowledge from India. And Pythagoreans were the people who believed in vegetarianism in Greece. And that is why we can also assume safely that the theorem, which we call Pythagoras theorem, was also taken from India, because India's Shulba Sutras are very, very old, very ancient. So Indian knowledge went to the Middle East, And in Baghdad, for example, the Khalifa would invite scholars to come and settle there and translate the Ayurvedic texts. And that's why Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, these were all available to the scholars of those time there in Baghdad, right? From the 8th, 9th century onwards, you can see that so much of transfer of knowledge has happened to Baghdad. And from there, it went to Europe. So Europeans, when they took over the Islamic territories, they took all that knowledge, they translated it to Latin, and then it became European knowledge. And that's how the whole connection with India got erased. Okay, so this is a huge topic. It's the longest chapter in my book, so I can't give it all, share it all today. But the point I want to make is that being rooted in Indian knowledge, Indian pedagogy, will actually make you a force for good in so many ways. You get to see the big picture, you know, the holistic view of everything. You will see beyond your own culture, beyond your body, the beyond boundaries, and you will see all the connected systems. You become a seeker when you are rooted in Indian knowledge systems. You become a seeker, you become a scientist, you become a logician. And, you know, there is this famous quote by Einstein where he said that you cannot solve problems with the same thinking used in creating the problems. So in today's world, there are so many problems. We have the climate that is changing at a furious pace. We are having all these hurricanes, tornadoes, desertification and whatnot. Then we are having, you know, this issue of carbon footprint. All of us are consuming so many things, pollution that is being generated, rivers are polluted, land is polluted, we are garbage mountains everywhere. Then we have psychological issues, so many problems. And when you look at solving these problems, then the realization dawns that just like Einstein said, you cannot solve these problems with the thinking used to create the problems. It was not Sanatana Dharma or Bharatiya Drishti that was used when all these things came into play. These problems have come from the modern way of thinking, from the Western modern way of thinking. And that's why I think that when you root yourself in Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, you become a force for good, and you will bring back balance to the world. It's not just for India, it's not just for Hindus. The whole world needs to be rooted in Indian knowledge systems. And to give you a small example, you know, if you look at how the Bharatiya Drishti has changed, how our Drishti has changed from Bharatiya to a foreign-driven Drishti. So for thousands of years, we used to go to these Tirthasthanas, you know, the temples located on mountains, for example, very difficult to reach places, and they would be surrounded by greenery and beauty of nature, and there would be difficult journeys. So the yatris would have to climb, they would have to undergo difficulty to reach this place, but there would be a lot of fun, you know, there would be a lot of sharing, they would be staying in dharmashalas, sharing their food, sharing all these things, you know, having a good time, but difficult but enjoyable. They would get the darshan of the deity and they would come back home very rejuvenated. Now this whole, when our drishti changed and we got modernized, then what it became now is that now we have hill stations. In fact, the culture of hill stations was started by the British when they were ruling over India. And so all these places, Shimla and all these became like, you know, places just for enjoyment. You go there, you stay in some hotel. Today, what it has become now, copying what the British did. Just places where you just sit there and do nothing. There's no concept of now going to the temple of that place, giving respect to the Grama Devata over there. Nothing of that. Just relax there, play some games, and then come back home. So see, the whole drishti which changed, and you can make out which one is better for the world and better for the universe, and how it got replaced. Now, in my, during my research after I finished writing my books, I have actually visited so many gurukulas, and I'm seeing how the pedagogical traditions of India are being applied. So I'm having, that is the direction that I'm going now. These are all the places I've been to: Uttar Pradesh, I've been to Karnataka, Gujarat, and so on. I'm looking forward to visiting the Gurukula that Samskara Foundation has started. I hope in my next trip I'm able to do that. So this is just to share a few photos with you. This is Vishnu Gupta Vishwa Vidyapitha in Gokarna that I visited in Karnataka, where this is an astronomy class that is going on, and all the students are listening, and they are able to imbibe in the oral way of instruction so well. And I was wondering, how are they understanding? No diagram has been drawn, but still they are understanding. That's because they are being told what diagram to draw and all that. And they're asking good questions to the teacher. And this is how they were learning astronomy. But inside, of course, there were classrooms with whiteboards and all that. But just to show you how children are sitting in the midst of nature and learning astronomy. Then this is Vidyaranya Gurukula in Telangana that I visited a few months before, where this is a Veda Pathshala, but they were having a chess tournament which had been arranged, and there was a chess teacher who's teaching them this. So they're learning all these modern subjects, modern things along with the age-old subjects. Then Vidya Kshetra in Bengaluru, which is also one of my favorite Gurukulas, where these children are now learning agriculture. So there is a 1 hour of agriculture that all the students have to do. So in this way, I am going to so many Gurukulas to see what are the ways of teaching that they're using, which we can bring into our modern system. So I hope you found this interesting. This is the link for buying my book. And these are the ways in which you can contact me on Twitter, Facebook, and so on. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sahana ji. So I'm sure not only did we take away so many things from the perspective of the knowledge tradition, but also a few things to apply to our current time. But I'm also equally sure there are a lot of questions that people have for you, Sahana ji. So Rajiv ji, do you want us to have live questions, or do you want us to type the questions in chat and then Sahana ji can?
Yeah, we can have live questions.
Live questions, okay. Yeah, so anybody who wants to ask something, please come on video, my request, and then ask your question.
If there are any difficult questions, Sarvesh is going to answer them.
Oh. By the way, I have Sahana ji's book here in library. Both her books are here in the Saraswati Sadan library. And so this probably is opportune time for me to say that you become member of this library. Also invite your friends to join. And we study books such as Sahana ji's book here regularly. So while others are warming up, Sahana ji, may I ask you to kindly throw some light about particularly women's aspect of Indian education system? What was the role? Of course, we are aware of the Rishikas and the mentions of female scholars, but ordinary woman or a girl, what was their participation in the education?
So I think basic literacy was there for everybody. I can see that they are all learning how to read and write. That was, I think, required. It was a desirable thing for everybody. And I don't think it was very common for women to go into learning the Veda. Of course, we have examples of Brahmavadinis and all that, but I think very few women were actually taking it up because it is such a hard life. It's also a kind of renunciation. And I think society always wanted women to not become ascetics because they also have this role to play in society, which is very important. But at the same time, there was never really a denial of education for women, because we see examples of women who were very interested in learning something, they were doing it. What was? I mean, we have, for example, Meera herself, Meerabai, for example. She just, she found her way and she did what she wanted to do. And same way we find those examples. One of the startling discoveries for me was that in Karnataka, in Kolar, there was a carving of a woman scholar there, which was found. And I was surprised. I said, why are people not talking about this? There's a scholar, I think her name is Savinir Madi or something. Her name is written there in Kannada. And she's having, her hair tied up in a bun, just like a scholar. And she is written there as a very learned, Shastra learned person. Her parents' names are given. And it looks like all the village was respecting, that whole Kolar region was respecting her. That's why they've taken the trouble to make a carving of her. So you see, that is one for a physical example I got, that women, those who are passionate about learning, they were going ahead. And of course, you would be familiar with in Kama Sutra also, there is reference to how a married man, is also supposed to be helping his wife to study further, or he's to teach himself. He has to continue his wife's education. So even if the girls are getting married, it's not like, oh, education is no longer open to them, because they are the first teacher of the children. So the husband has to teach the wife. If there is something she's interested in, the husband is teaching her, or maybe making arrangements for somebody to come and teach her. That evidence is there. And then the 64 kalas, we see that those 64 kalas are to be, there are so many mentions of women who are well versed in the 64 kalas. And when you look at those kalas, so many of those things include what today would come in engineering and science study, right? So all those things are there for women. So it looks like women were studying, women were learning, but most women were actually going into the arts. They were probably going into artistic things, they are decorating and things like that, because maybe that was the propensity of the women. That's where a lot of women were interested in, dressing up well and keeping the house beautiful and those kind of things, cooking food. Again, cooking food involves science in it. There's a lot of knowledge of Ayurveda. Metallurgy is included in the 64 kalas, so that means women also have to know metallurgy. Which means if they're cooking in some pot or pan, they should know what it is made of, what metal is it good to cook in that, and all those things. So definitely the picture I got is of women who are learned, but not everybody is equally learned. I mean, some of them would be pursuing it more and others would be, because you have to understand the biological function is also important. Children have to reproduce, and then women have to reproduce, and then when the children have to be brought up, they have to be given care. So it's not like women will go away somewhere for education and not be with the children. That was not acceptable. So we can't impose today's values on ancient times.
Yeah. Here in public, we have few questions. So I request them to come we have some restriction on camera. We have one camera here, so I request people to come.
Namaskar. Sainaji.
Namaste. Namaskar.
I've gone through your book precisely, not fully. And I hope you have written about the education system to be brought. The learning can be from three sources. One from parents, family. Second is from society. Third is by government. Government is so many complexity. Every government cannot satisfy everybody.
True.
Complexity of politics. Society, at present society is suffering from so much evils. Family is one source. Now Gurukula cannot be opened. Efforts can be made, but not can be opened. Really. But family is family culture, family tradition. It can be given from parents to sons, family members, daughters. Sanskaras can be done by family members first. So we should also adopt to impress on families to culture, maybe Western, maybe Indian, maybe anybody.
Yeah.
So what about your thoughts?
Totally. I mean, learning starts from home. So the mother will teach certain samskaras. The father also has to do so much. So if that goes away, then the government cannot. No outsider can make up for that. To some extent, they'll fill your head with some data, some facts. But the actual knowledge that you need to live your life, I think it starts from home. You're very right. And not to forget that in ancient times, even the skills that were taught were all home-based. So industry was not like what industry is today, right? It was all home-based industries. So when today people say that, women were not taught or that it makes no sense, because the family itself is together pursuing that knowledge and taking it to the next generation. So if it's a Vaidya's family, then the woman of the house is also involved in helping the Vaidya, making his concoctions. The children will also help, getting the herbs from outside, doing work for that. So the women will also know a lot about Ayurveda just by being in that Vaidya's family. So it doesn't. So in those days, this kind of ecosystem of learning was there, and you brought it out so beautifully. That ecosystem has been uprooted because in the name of a lot of modern development, now everybody has to go out of the house, and the house is now a place where nobody wants to stay in the house, right?
At least at the time of dinner, one family should gather together.
Correct. They should gather together, and in fact,
table for half an hour.
Right.
Be together.
In fact, during COVID, that was the time when first time now families started being together and there's nobody going out, right? And there were many people reported positive things from that for staying together.
Of course. Okay, thank you. The other thing is only knowledge is all right. Knowledge is good, but as you have already mentioned in your book, that only 5% should be knowledge based. 95 should be skill-based.
Yes, I mean, Veda.
Skill training is also must.
Yes, yes,
India, particularly in Bharat, skill is very much needed. Not
Right.
only alphabetical knowledge or
correct,
certification knowledge, but skill development is very much needed.
right, right.
So
In
that
fact, the skills also had their own Upanayana ceremonies. From what I
yes,
read in Radha Kumud Mukherjee's book,
yes,
just like there is an Upanayana going for an entry into the Veda learning, Vedanta learning, there was a kind of ceremony going on in all the trades,
all the
all the
trades, all
skills,
the trades, all the
where they
trades.
accept, the guru accepts the student and teaches the skill.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Dhanyavad, Sahana ji. Others, if they have any questions, they can come
I
here.
also see some text. Maybe you can
We
ask them
can.
to unmute and ask.
Yeah, I request people to go ahead and ask, come on video and ask. I see Pratyusha has asked some questions. Pratyusha is known for difficult questions.
Yeah, I was raising my hand and now I lowered because I was on mute.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Sahanadi, I don't have my question is like not a question, but just a confirmation that as you said, like attributes that memories, education going by in, flora and fauna, setup, nature, and all this like by memory, reciting and all that. So like isn't this like a music plays a big role in the education system? Because as we say that the alphabets or whatever, Maheshwar Sukta started with the Naad of Damru, so it originated from music. So what Panini wrote Sukta, they all were originated from Naad. And whatever we are learning, Vedas or any mantras, we need to learn, pay attention how they are have to be recited.
Correct.
So this is what we miss and we learn in classroom, like we don't recite.
Right. Today we don't have any memory techniques, right? When something is
Yes.
taught in the class, it is just taught, and now it's up to you how you remember it. No techniques given.
Yeah.
Whereas in those days, the chandas is actually the main thing. The chanda is what is helping people to remember it. The pattern in the way it goes, the meter was what was helping them to remember. And today our memories have degraded to the point that we can't remember anything, and it's affecting actually other areas of our thinking, but we are not aware of it. Because we think everything we can Google or it's in the hard disk. And then so all those things are fragmented now. We think that we know a little bit and we have to add up all that and then try to understand something, which takes time. And by then we are distracted. So I think we really, really need to collaborate with Veda Pathshalas and the Gurukulas in the mainstream, so-called mainstream system to learn from them. So Gurukulas are not some archaic places where the way they are learning is not relevant. I think memory aspect especially is very, very relevant for today. Other things are also there. Entire disciplines like Nyaya and this thing, the astronomy, Jyotisha is also there. But memory is something that I'm finding very interesting, that we have to focus on that.
Yeah, just like we tell our kids or grandkids, they started learning first lessons. We always said, speak out and write it, then you will know it by heart and never forget it. So now this is very important role of the learning. Thanks, your input.
Pratyusha, do you want to go next? Okay. So I will read out her question, Sahana ji.
Huh.
She's saying, how can an education system that was passed down primarily orally, how can it lose its knowledge substantially in modern times, as having the text memorized means that there are no books to be destroyed? So how can memory be destroyed?
No, what I'm saying is that today's, I'm talking about not the Vedic knowledge. Yes, the Vedas have been preserved by oral transmission. Excellent. The number of people studying the Vedas is, of course, diminishing. More people are in the mainstream, and Veda learning is very, very less. And they also are made to feel inferior because they don't know what these people are studying in the so-called mainstream system. So that is the problem. Now, I'm talking about the modern system where memory is not being valued. So yes, the orally transmitted Vedas are there. They are intact. But the other things, what have we taken from there? The Vedas got preserved, but then today's world, we are not making any use of that. Everything is inside books and in the cloud or in the disk. So I'm talking about that loss, that memory that we have lost by not using our whole brain in thinking and analyzing. That is the thing that I was highlighting. The Vedic knowledge is there, but yes, a lot of shakhas have gone, by the way. A lot of shakhas have gone in Rig Veda, in Sama Veda. So many shakhas have been gone, just a few are left. So the Veda is there, but again, because we are not studying all the allied subjects with the Vedas, the understanding of the Vedas and the sound of the Vedas will go away if we don't have more and more people learning it. The ones with Adhikara, of course, I don't mean just everybody go and learn. That might be a controversial thing to say, but yes. Vedas have to be preserved, and some techniques from there might be useful for us in modern education.
Yeah, there is a saying, Sahanaji, very traditional saying, Sa vidyaya kanthastha, na pustuke, na gurau na cha. That learning is only that which is in kanthastha, which is memorized. Not that which you learned from book, which is in book, or not that which you heard from your guru and which is in guru.
Wow.
Learning is only that which is in your kantha, which is always in your memory.
But for some reason, the rote learning has a very bad rep, right? People think rote learning means, oh, okay, learn. But today you see tables that we used to memorize, the multiplication tables. If that is not memorized, then you are becoming you will find cashiers are unable to do simple calculations. They have to use the calculator. They can't do simple things, right? So it's true. Memory, learning by learning, having it in your brain, having all these things inside, all the books, entire this thing, Ashtadhyayi is in the brain of Pandits, imagine, and so many others, right? At least 4 or 5 books would be in their head. So very quickly, they can bring all that data together, analyze something which is happening in real time. I think that is an amazing skill to have.
Yeah. So recently, of course, people would have done Chandi Patha during Navaratri. In the preface of one of the popular tikas of Durga Saptashati, it is said that one should chant if it is less than 1,000 shloka, then without a book. So, which means that Saptashati, if somebody is doing Parayana, should do without a book because it's only 700 shlokas. So, any book which has more than 1,000 shlokas, and if you are doing Parayana, then do it by looking at the book. Otherwise, do it without looking at the book. It is said in the very preface of a famous.
A thumb rule is that, yeah, nice. Actually, today there are talks about studying this memory technique to see if it is useful in treating Alzheimer's, because a lot of people are getting Alzheimer's today. So whether early on, if you have all these memorization techniques in your education, will it help in dealing with Alzheimer's, or maybe slow the onset of Alzheimer's? So a lot of relevance in today's life.
Sanaji, Kannanji has a comment. He says, I don't know if it is a question or a comment. He says, sadly, now home-based knowledge is less. Sadly, that ecosystem is destroyed.
Absolutely. Yeah, because parents themselves are not parenting, so they are busy. I don't know if I should blame them. There are careers to be pursued. Everything is expensive. So the whole ecosystem is gone, whereby people stayed at home and studied and taught and passed on the family knowledge and things like that. Yeah, agreed.
Sanaji, what do you make of the famous adage that it takes a village to raise a child? Is it really true?
Totally true, totally true. I mean, when I was raising my baby, when she was a baby in Singapore all by myself, how much I suffered and what all I felt sick and things like that. And I feel like that time got wasted. If she was surrounded with by village today, we would of course mean uncles, aunts, cousins, and everybody. Also teachers, everything. I mean, the whole system. And when you just stay in an ecosystem of where all people are yours, the people are your people, you learn a lot of things. I felt like she missed out on so much by not being raised by a community. And I see the difference in the people who are who have come from villages, whose childhood has been in villages. I can see how so many things they regard as it's not work. Like they're used to helping out other people. They don't think like, oh, I did a big favor. I mean, helping others is normal. Sharing things is normal. So today's kids, for example, they won't like to share their room or share the bathroom and things like that. I have seen a lot of that. Again, that's because they have not been raised in a community. So they have too much of this I-ness, it's mine, it's mine, that kind of thing. And health, I feel that when there was a community taking care, then the mother also got a little bit more time to herself. The cooking was shared, right? So a lot of things I feel like psychologically and mentally also, it affects when there is not a community to raise a child.
Yeah. So from the audience or both online or here in person, any questions, please go ahead. You can come on camera or you can come behind the camera in case of in person and ask your question. Okay, if not, then Sahana ji, I mean, we are of course very grateful. Your guidance. You are a director of Samskara Foundation, and your guidance has always been a beacon light of direction for all the activities that are happening. So, I mean, saying thank you will be belittling all the guidance that you have been giving and your lecture today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The learning is mutual. As you know, I'm learning Vrichakatika from you and so many other things. So thank you very much. It's a beautiful organization. I'm so proud to be a part of this.
Thank you, Sahana ji. We will go back to Gurukula. I don't know if Krishna ji or Ashutosh ji. Krishna ji, you are here still? कृष्णा जी आप हैं? तो आप कैमरा पर आ जाइए। आशुतोष जी आप ही आ जाइए, कुछ आशीर्वचन से समापन करेंगे।
शांति पाठ करा दें?
हाँ शांति जी। कृष्णा जी आप अनम्यूट हो
जी।
हाँ, बटुक गण और आप कुछ कहना करना चाहेंगे?
ओम श्री गणेशाय नमः, श्री सरस्वत्यै नमः, श्री वेदपुरुषाय नमः। हरिः ओम समेधाग्निन्दुवस्याताघ्रेतैर्गोधार्यता एतिं मा आस्मिन् हव्याय वो नामा शिशुपादिस्ते पीता नमस्ते अस्तु मामाहि निवर्तायामि आयुधे नादिया यः प्राजानानायारायस्वोगा यासु प्राजास्तु वा यासु वीर्जाया ॐ तच्चक्षुर्देवाहेदं पुरस्ताच्छुक्रामुच्चायया पश्येमासायताः शातन्ति शारदा शतं दीनास्याम शारदा शतं यश्च शारदाः सदा ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ
धन्यवाद आचार्य जी, धन्यवाद बटुक गण। सभी को आज सम्मिलित होने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। और प्रसाद की व्यवस्था है, तो कार्यक्रम के उपरांत जो लोग यहाँ पर हैं अटलांटा में अपने कार्यक्रम में, सबके लिए प्रसाद की व्यवस्था है, प्रसाद लेकर के ही जाएंगे। सभी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। नमस्कार।